Hey, it's Beth. Welcome back to Chill English Dose, a space where we learn English naturally through reflections, stories, and real-life words. Today's story is about the things we never really stop to question, the ideas, routines, and truths we grow up with but rarely think about again. You know, those small habits that feel automatic. They guide us every day, but sometimes we never ask why we do them. I started thinking about this last week while making my morning coffee. I used to always drink it with milk. One morning, I ran out, so I drank it black. And suddenly, I realized I actually liked it better that way. It hit me that I'd been drinking coffee the same way for years, not because I liked it, but because I never questioned it. It's funny how small things can show us big truths about how we live. We all have things we do without thinking, taking the same road to work, scrolling before bed, saying, "I'm fine," when we're not. Sometimes they make life easier, but sometimes they keep us from noticing what we really need. I guess that's why I love evenings like this. Quiet, a little slow, with just enough space to think. Because when life gets too fast, questioning feels like a luxury. But it's not. It's actually how we stay awake to our own choices. Questioning doesn't mean doubting everything or being cynical. It's just a way of saying, wait, does this still make sense for me? Because we all change. And when we change, the answers we once believed might not fit anymore. But most of us were never taught how to ask gentle questions, especially about ourselves. We were told to be certain, to know what we want. So we end up living on autopilot, doing, deciding, agreeing, without much reflection. And that's okay for a while. But if you never pause to ask, you might wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's definition of happiness. When I started writing again last year, I noticed how many of my thoughts came from voices that weren't my own. Teachers, friends, even social media. It wasn't until I questioned them that I started finding my own words again. And honestly, it's both freeing and uncomfortable, because questioning means facing the possibility that you might have been wrong. And that's not easy. But it's also how growth starts. It's how we return to ourselves. I wrote down a few words tonight, the kind that remind me what questioning really means. The first one is question. Its basic meaning is something you ask to get information. But real questions aren't just about getting answers. They're about understanding. They open doors instead of closing them. The next one is assumption. It means a belief that something is true without proof. We live with so many of these. We assume what people think. We assume what success looks like. We assume what we should do next. But when you question your assumptions, life starts to look a little more honest and a little lighter. Then there's awareness. It means the state of knowing about something. Awareness is what questioning creates. It doesn't fix everything, but it lets you see more clearly. And that's where change begins. And one more word, autopilot. It means doing something automatically without thinking. Autopilot saves energy, but if you stay there too long, you might miss the feeling of being alive in your own story. Sometimes I think questioning isn't about finding new answers. It's about remembering that you can ask, that you have the right to pause and think again. We talk a lot about mindfulness these days, but mindfulness is really just the habit of questioning softly, without judgment, without rush. When was the last time you asked yourself, why? Not in a heavy way, just gently, like a curious friend. Because maybe the most important questions aren't the big ones. Maybe they're the small ones we whisper to ourselves when life finally gets quiet. Sometimes we think life is complicated because there are too many things to figure out. But often it's not complexity, it's repetition. We just keep repeating the same patterns, the same reactions, the same beliefs without asking where they came from. It's like we live inside invisible routines that we never chose. They were passed down to us from family, culture, school, or experience, and somewhere along the way they became the way things are. But what if they don't have to be? I remember a conversation I had with a friend a few years ago. She said she always felt guilty taking breaks, even short ones. When I asked why, she said, because that's what my mom always did. She never stopped working. And that made me think, sometimes the things we never question don't even start with us. They're borrowed patterns we carry without realizing it. And that's why questioning isn't just about being smart, it's about being awake. It's how we bring light into the corners of our lives that we've stopped noticing. When you start asking small questions like, do I really need to do this? Or does this still make me happy? You slowly untangle yourself from habits that no longer serve you. It's not about rejecting everything. It's about choosing consciously, again. That's what awareness does. It doesn't make life perfect. It just makes life yours. There's a quiet strength in curiosity, in allowing yourself to wonder again. Because sometimes we confuse being sure with being right. But certainty can make you rigid. Curiosity keeps you alive. And maybe that's what thinking clearly really means. Not knowing all the answers, but staying open to keep learning. When you think about it, most of the things that truly changed your life probably began with a question. What if I tried this? Why am I still doing that? Do I still believe this is who I am? Questions are the first signs of growth. They mean you're paying attention again. I wrote down a few more words tonight that remind me what questioning gently can bring. The first one is perspective. It means a particular way of seeing something. Perspective doesn't change what happens. It changes how you see it. When you ask questions, you start seeing from a wider angle. And the second is choice. It means the act of deciding between possibilities. Every question is an invitation to choose differently, to live more intentionally. I think we spend most of our lives trying to get answers, but maybe the wiser thing to do is to protect our ability to ask. Because once you stop questioning, you stop growing. It doesn't mean you have to analyze everything or live in doubt. It just means you give yourself permission to pause before saying yes, before agreeing, before assuming. That pause, that small question, is where clarity begins. And in a world that moves too fast, that's an act of courage. So tonight, if you're listening to this while doing something ordinary, cooking, driving, folding clothes, maybe take a second to ask yourself, what have I been doing automatically? Does it still feel right? You might be surprised at how much peace you find in asking softly. What's one belief, habit, or rule you've been following without thinking, and what might change if you questioned it today? Write it down, or just think about it quietly. You don't need to have the answer yet. The question itself is enough. You don't have to question everything at once. Start small. Start with what's in front of you. And when you do, you'll notice something beautiful. That life feels more honest when you stop living on autopilot. If tonight's story made you think a little, or breathe a little slower, subscribe to Chill English Dose for more stories and mindful English listening.